This podcast and broadcast is brought to you by Home Loan Advocates. That's right, my partner David Bartel at Home Loan Advocate. They specialized in distressed property solutions for buyers, sellers, investors, and realtors across the country. Doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter the situation you're in. If you're working on a distressed property and you need some assistance, call 805-413-8000. Again, that number is 805-413-8000. Ask for David Bartels or visit homeloanadvocates.com.
Can you guys hear me anyway? I think we lost Lee.
We're all back to normal. There we go.
There you go.
Welcome back, everybody. Let's get into general real estate. I'm joined by David Bartels of Everhome. Let's start right there, David. Tell me about Everhome and why it's going to be totally different.
Is this I've got my video on and I'm wearing a mask. Is it safe to take it off?
You're completely fine.
Okay.
I'm never sure if it'll actually record half the time because it's a whole weird thing with GoToWebinar. I've tried it with other shows and it always fails. So hopefully your video actually works. If not, there'll be a photo of yourself at this moment. First and foremost, we're going to kind of change gears. We're not getting away from distressed properties because that's the reality of the situation. But what we really want to focus on is the basic mechanics of being a real estate agent and being successful. And if I'm here in California, David, you've got a company going public. Tell me all about it.
Well, I really want to focus on the issues of the day more, but Everhome is a technology-based company that is going to change the way that consumers transact real estate. And so we've created some incredible technology that basically puts the technology of an agent in the hands of a home seller and gives them ability right from their phone if they want to be able to input everything that an agent would input, list it to the MLS, obviously with a pit stop before it goes live, but be able to, in about 20 minutes, list the house on the multiple listing service and get all the flexibility to control and cost savings of for sale by owner, but the massive exposure and full service representation, but without having to pay full service representation fees.
Basic, simple. And if you're a homeowner and you're listening to this, you should contact who?
Well, you can reach us at 805-413-8000. We're officially not Everhome yet. We're still Help Yourself Full Service Realty. We're making that transition. We hope in the next couple of days. In fact, I was checking the DRE website today. We're just waiting for permission to proceed doing business. So we're not soliciting business under the name of Everhome. We're transacting business under Help Yourself Full Service Realty, but Everhome is on the horizon, and hopefully sometime in August, early August, we'll be able to unveil it officially.
And I assume basically 805-413-8000 for real estate agents throughout California that are interested?
Well, 805-413-8000 is for our distress stuff. So if you've got questions about foreclosures or loan modifications or short sales in particular, that would be the best way to reach us through our Home Loan Advocates company. And if you want help with a real estate transaction, whether or not you're buying, selling, or are interested in learning more about our new for sale with owner program, then you would call 805-379-3300.
Perfect. So let's talk the economy. California per se, as well as the rest of the country. California hit another milestone. I hate to be the news bearer because I watch my phone like a hawk. We hit the third consecutive day of the highest death total in the nation. Yay, 3 in a row.
Yeah.
We're number one. I live in San Diego County. My daughter is going to be on year-round at-home school, which makes me remarkably happy. I'm sorry for the rest of the country, but let's talk about this, right? California rolled back and some other states are rolling back. We've talked about this month in, month out since back all the way to my birthday. This is going to have an impact on the economy at some point. I mean, ultimately, I don't know what's holding up the current economy. I want to get your feedback, especially because of your unique perspective, especially your wife's unique perspective. What's literally keeping the stock market afloat? What's keeping the dollar afloat? What's keeping us all afloat at this moment?
Well, I'm looking for something on my phone right now because I sent some stuff to the team about this. One of the things I do on the weekend is I read the Wall Street Journal and I read Barron's, and I'm trying to kind of keep abreast of what's happening. I start my days reading business news and really just trying to understand what's happening. So everything is relative. The more people that you have in a state, the more positive, the more incidents of COVID that you're going to have, the more deaths. We really want to measure what's happening based on a percentage of the population as opposed to just the raw numbers. But it is frightening. It's obviously has reversed, and the loosening of the COVID restrictions and then the tightening of them has really changed some of the short-term and long-term perspectives of business and the economy and how that affects consumers, like us. And so one of the things that we're seeing is obviously there's some real questions about what's happening as it relates to evictions and foreclosures and what impact that is going to have on the overall economy. And so while everyone is reporting, why everybody is reporting that the economy has been stalled, it has really been propped up by the government. Here's a statistic that I read over this weekend. These are really some of the impacts. 68%, this is according to Barron's, 68% of unemployment recipients who make more than their 68 is the percentage of unemployment recipients who make more with their federal $600 a week payment than from their old job. Well, right. That's frightening. Well, those benefits have ended. There's obviously some negotiations taking place right now. One of the challenges that we've had is that even when they were loosening restrictions and people were being invited to go back to work, one of the problems were people didn't want to go back to work because they enjoyed being retired, so to speak, and making more money than they would. So now they're saying, I got to get up and go to work and I'm going to make less money. And a lot of people said, no, thank you. So as part of the stimulus negotiations, they were trying to, and I guess there's still some effort to do that, is a get back to work bonus where they'll give people a one-time bonus to go back to work early versus sitting on the sidelines and taking federal money. There's a problem there when you can make more money by not working than you can by working, and I'm hoping that they kind of get that sorted out. Here's another thing that they said is 20%. That's the number of home-based estimate of percentage of U.S. child care facilities that remain closed. And the reason that number is important is because if I don't know how many of you ever tried to work with a 6-year-old running around the house, but it's tough to do.
Let's go with the 16-year-old. I can do it with a 16-year-old at this moment.
Right. Or a 16-year-old. They're bored. They want some attention. They want to chit chat. You're trying to focus on, and they want to talk about what's for dinner and.
And the reality is truly this. Even my ex-wife said, how do you feel about me going back to being a housewife with my husband? And I went, yeah, I'm okay with it. What's the cost? What is the actual cost of that? Yeah. She goes, I can work from home. I'll make less, blah, blah, blah. And I went, okay, she's big enough. Yeah. She can feed herself and you're in the house with her.
Right. So, I think that's exactly right. So I think that we're going to see this. So, I got here this morning and Judy, who, leads our team for short sale negotiations and that kind of, and she's on the phone all day long with banks. She came in and to give me an update, she had a conversation with somebody who worked in Bank of America's loan mod department. And I think this piece of inside information will kind of foretell what you can expect over the coming months. And it kind of surprised me. There you are.
Here I am.
it kind of.
Well, I had to put clothes on, and look, all shaved. I've decided to go younger since we had our conversation yesterday where you said I look way too old for my own good. So I shaved everything
No,
off
I didn't
again.
say that. I said I didn't realize you were 52. I thought you were younger already. Yeah.
I mean, right? If I shave it all off, I'm a whopping 30 something.
Oh, for sure. You probably still get carded. So what Bank of America has advised in internal memos here in California, and they've got a big distressed property department in Simi Valley, which happens to be my neighborhood, right? My area. And they're basically saying that their loan mod and short sale departments are being directed not to work on loan mods and short sales and to focus all of their attention on COVID-19 related issues. And so that is processing the forbearance applications. And
so we're back to the spreader theory, right? What we talked about in 2007, which is let's just push it back as far as we can and deal with it one at a time and try to make the best deal we can, which is very classic asset management.
Yeah, so it's all hands on deck, you know, and they also said that they're not really, they said that they're not recognizing the state guidelines right now. So the federal guidelines are that the eviction moratorium is up. I think it ended the 26th or 7th of this month. I think most banks are observing till the end of the month. And going forward, they're going to do whatever they're going to do. Now, they haven't been told whether or not they're going to process foreclosures or not. I asked Judy, were they aware that in California anyway, and every state is different, that the moratorium is basically until 90 days after they lift the restrictions. So 90 days after they lift the restrictions, they'll be able to resume foreclosure and eviction activity. And she said they were aware of it, but they had been instructed to follow the national mandate, not the state mandate.
So the process that I've talked about repeatedly, so a bank will follow a process. And for those of you listening for the first time or on the call for the first time, I'm a former asset manager. So we follow one general guideline. So whatever the bank says, that's what we do. So if the guideline for the state is 30 days, 30-day notice, going through the regular process of appointing someone to a foreclosure status, what they're saying is we just simply can't go to court and evict until after the moratorium has been lifted. And in California, am I wrong? He's saying now the end of the year, correct?
Well, he's saying 90 days after it gets lifted. So even if, and there's no chance that this will happen, but even if they lifted, say, August 1st, then you're looking at September 1st, October 1st, November 1st. Right? Before you can do it.
But you can run the process. I think this is where everybody gets it wrong. You can run the process so that the day the moratorium is lifted, I can immediately file with my attorney in court and immediately move into a pay all or quit.
Yeah, what it would be, November before it's 90 days, and then they begin the process, and that's going to be a slow moving process. So I would say that if you live in California, you have no danger of being foreclosed on before the end of the year.
I would even say evicted. I would even say safely evicted. As a renter, and I don't know why everybody isn't doing this. This is the one thing I find really interesting about the economy right now. People are still doing what they did in 2007. Let's borrow on our credit cards. Let's pay our bills. Let's keep the lights on. Let's keep going with everything. And you're basically draining your liquid assets to keep yourself alive. And that to me is the most interesting thing that I have seen now in two cycles. 2007, the banks actually recommended borrowing against your cards, making the payments and moving forward and keeping your mortgage clean. And here we are again. We have people that I guarantee are borrowing against credit assets and then keeping their lights, and even people on this call. It's a very, someone I dated recently did this. I need to make my payments. Why? Make the phone call. Make the phone call and stop this. They're going to put it back 90 days. And if they don't, there's nothing they can do. I don't want to do that. I had a friend recently refinance their house. He goes, how soon after can I stop making payments? I said, the day after you get your first payment, you should make the phone call if you're going to, because he refinanced down to whatever it is, 2 or 3% or whatever crazy number.
My refinance closed Monday, 2 3/8.
Yeah. And his was, I think, 3 in Vegas. And he goes, how long should I wait? I said, wait for the first bill and then call them and tell them he's a union pipe layer in Vegas. And I said, the first bill, you call them and you ask for the extension. I go, it's a no-brainer. And I don't understand the fundamental principle within, I guess it's human beings that, or is it indoctrination, which is kind of a weird word, but truthfully, we kind of believe we have to make these calls. We have to make these bills. We should borrow against our credit. We should keep pushing this forward instead of you're in way over your head and this is robbing Peter to pay Paul. And at some point, which we've seen again, which is why we're both here, 2007 to 2010, all over again. At some point, this reaches a buffer.
Well, the worst advice ever, I think, given to homeowners is to borrow money to pay their mortgage. So,
and I've done it. And because that was the script, right? Get the money wherever you can.
Yeah, well, that's your job as a loss mitigator is to, to manage how much money you lose. So it's about loss avoidance.
And it's about my bonus. It's about what I get paid. It's about what I do on a daily basis. And I don't think I think really people still believe that the bank is on their side. And that's not the truth. They lent you money to do something. They're no different than your credit card.
All right. If you hear a recording when you call, which is every time that says this is an intent to collect the debt, they are not on your side. I mean, their sole purpose is to lose the least amount of money and to collect the money. But I mean, from a consumer perspective, if you are a homeowner and you're borrowing money because you can't make your mortgage payment, well, the bottom line the problem you have to solve is I can't afford my mortgage payment. Borrowing does not solve it. It just exacerbates it. And so what happens is you're going to end up losing your house eventually. And my theory has always been is that if you're going to lose your house, lose it with money in the bank versus losing the house with no money in the bank. I can tell you countless stories of people who use their savings account and then use their college money for their kids and then emptied their 401ks and then borrowed money on top of that and still lost their house. So not only did they lose their house, they owed all this other money and that they ended up having to pay back. They were in a lot worse shape than they were to begin with, and they would have been much better off just to reckon with reality that they couldn't afford their house and they needed to find an alternative solution to that and then at least preserve their ability to live their life tomorrow as opposed to set themselves back 15, 20, 30, 40 years, however long it took them to accumulate those assets and have to start all over again in an uncertain world. So that is, it's bad advice to borrow money to be able to get it done. And there's no reason to. If the banks are willing to allow you to forego payments, they're not going to foreclose on you. They're not going to evict you. If you can't afford to make your mortgage payment,
I'm stunned by this.
Don't borrow the money to do it.
I've literally been stunned by this emotionally with lots of people who brought this up to me, which is the basic of, well, it's going to hurt me. What's going to hurt you? You already have the place. You already have the credit card. You already have people that are giving you money. What I suspect, and I'd like your feedback on this, I think the bankruptcy courts in the next 3 years are going to be kind of a crap show.
Well, okay. So one of the things that I read over the weekend is this happened, during the meltdown.
2010, right?
Yeah, that the bankruptcy, attorneys, the bar association, which might be as powerful as NAR, yes. They went to Congress and they were, and not to mention, there's a lot more lawyers in Congress and the Senate than there are realtors. Okay, so makes them a powerful lobby attorneys. But the bankruptcy attorneys and lawyer and they tried to get the law that allowed bankruptcy to force modifications and to force a change in terms of the loan, and that did not get done. They didn't give trustees the ability to do that, only because the bank lobby is even more powerful than the attorney lobby to be able to get that done. And so now the attorneys are back again, looking to making another run at it, given the environment that we're in, and trying to get permission to address issues related to foreclosure, forbearance, loan modification inside the bankruptcy court again. And if you don't know, housing, the house is not part of the bankruptcy, unless you can amend a mortgage. That's a separate negotiation with the bank. It continues to be a separate negotiation with the bank. Unlike a credit card or even an automobile loan, a judge can just say, you don't owe it anymore, clean slate, go on. That does not happen.
Go on, go get more money. In fact, the next day,
right.
Which is hilarious. So the theory that I keep operating on is we're looking at the 2020 version, a decade later, of cram down theory one time again, which is what the Obama administration had put in place, which is just let them go negotiate it, put it into a simple payment plan, cram down theory. I call it spreader. Someone asked me the other day, how long do you think you can keep going? I said, I'd cash out as much money as I could. I don't think that the dollar can withstand a constant cram down, a constant zero interest lending rate. Based on what I know since '88, how do you keep giving money, keep forgiving money, and keep doing this repeatedly until the dollar itself actually collapses? And this is a pretty substantial hit to the market.
Well, the market is going to be in flux. I think that why we're going to see a spike in foreclosures and these kind of things. All the evidence points to that, and the banks are gearing up. Just look at their at the set asides at the banks. Bank of America is the one that we got this inside information, and obviously we think that's going to be the policy with other banks. But we also know from their quarterly report that they just set aside $5 billion plus in loss reserves in anticipation of losses. And if you want to know what's going to happen, down the road, just look at their, listen to their earnings calls or look at their quarterly reports and see follow the money, right? So when you see the bank with all of its wisdom and all the data, not worried, but they look at all the data, and you see them set aside $5 billion to cover losses related to COVID and foreclosure, you can be certain that there's going to be a massive uptick in foreclosure activity. The question is when, and so it's probably not going to be something we see until next year for all the reasons that we've talked about earlier. It's probably
and you have an election.
There's going to be a delay.
Yes, right, yeah. And especially with an election, I'm going to go way out on a limb and say Biden wins, based on the polling data. Again, I have no dog in the fight, but somebody's going to sign something within that first 30 days, which gives another moratorium and gives people a little more breathing room, which would be the most logical thing for either party to do. They're talking about 5 months on the Republican side, which is well after the election. If the Democrats move into power, then you're looking at first 30 days, and it's going to be another moratorium.
Well, I don't know if it's going to be a moratorium or not. A lot of that's, but this relief, to see the Republicans really pushing a bill that feels a lot like a Democrat, where you're just are running up the deficit and continuing this $600, a week payment, which I'm fine. I'm not criticizing the policy. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad. What I'm saying is that's 68% of people that are taking unemployment make more from unemployment than they do from their job. And the only reason a Republican would do that, who's whose platform is the word I'm looking for. Their platform is really designed to be fiscally conservative. To see them doing that kind of extending that kind of robust aid to people on unemployment, and I think aid is certainly appropriate given the nature of what's going on, is only because of the election year. And then once the election, good or bad, they're gonna get to their senses, and they're gonna say, okay, we gotta get this thing.
We gotta keep the economy stimulated, right?
Right. Something is
we're based literally on a concept of, if you don't have $1 in your pocket, there is nothing you can do. Period.
Yeah, I don't think
the only way the economy works is based on that concept.
Yeah, but you've got to get, at the end of the day, you've got to get small businesses and big businesses back to work. And so, we are continuing our hiring spree. We're doing our part. People are still transacting, real estate, but it's to be determined. So listen, there's a lot of what if. There is going to be some foreclosure. I think it's smart to be thinking about foreclosure and how you're going to help those people down the road, but it's down the road. I mean, the moratorium, the having to wear a mask still eliminates you from doing tagging and going face to face, and you've got to find other means. And nobody's got any urgency to do anything anyway. People are, if they're going to get unemployment and they're going to make unemployment that pays them more than going to work, and they don't have to make a rent or mortgage payment.
Right.
Why,
yeah, I agree.
Why do any of that stuff? Especially if you're a renter. I mean, imagine the renters who are just going to ride this out, and then they're going to get evicted, and I'll just go find another place. No big deal.
Right.
I'll keep my $15,000 that I owe you in rent, and I'll just go rent something else and start all over and do for a change anyway.
Yeah, if I didn't actually like my landlord, that would be probably my position. If I hated my landlord, I would literally just sit here and eat fast food until my head exploded and go for my my Pacific Crest Trail hikes every day. So what is different about this, right? So this is where I'm kind of confused as someone who's a banking person. So we stimulated insurance companies and banks not to collapse from 2007 to 2010. And now in 2020, we're just giving it back to humans, which was the debate in 2007 to 2010. Like, let's just give them money instead of to the banks, and let's see where it falls. So this time around, they go with a completely different approach. And I want to make this abundantly clear. Really go watch How Money Works. Just Google it. It's a great video on how the dollar is shared and spent and why it is what it is. The reason I bring it up, David, is so the previous time around, we bailed out companies with the hope of trickle-down theory, right? We'll keep the businesses alive. We will reinvest back into the businesses. This time around, we went a completely different approach, which was we're just going to give you the money, and excuse my French, it's a shit show either way. I mean, nobody has handled this completely correctly. I live in Oceanside, where I can safely tell you there were 20,000 people on the beach not doing anything that remotely looked like social distancing, next to a Marine base, which is the biggest Marine base in the United States. And I have constantly told, I'm friends with a lot of the cops around here, I go, the minute COVID gets on that base, I said, this beach is shut down. This city will be shut down. And that this whole town along the beach is small business run. So now you're looking at, all right, optimistically, 500-600 businesses that employ on average 2 to 3 people. So you're talking, all right, it's not that bad. It's 12, 13, 14, 1,500 people in a small Oceanside community. This isn't being addressed correctly. Like, nobody really has a good grip on the direction it should be going. I mean, we tried it one way of, we'll give all the money backs to the bank. And yes, for those of you who don't know, all the money we gave to the banks, they paid back plus interest, which most people don't realize. The banks actually paid back all their loans, which they didn't want, and gave it back with interest. It kind of held up the market. But the reason it held up the market was real estate became the commodity. And I don't think people know this. I was having this discussion with my own mother. You're sitting on $1 million of equity right now. I said in 6 months, it could easily be $500,000 worth of equity. Does it make more sense to refinance, sell, cash out? I'm asking you as a real estate professional. If I came to you and go, all right, my property is worth $1 million right now. 6 months to a year from today, is it still 6 months? Is it still half a million or a $500,000?
I'm not in the camp that we're going to have a crash, market value crash. I mean, you were asking, what the big difference is earlier between what happened,
trickle
in
down
2008
as
and 10.
comparing to enable people to have a choice.
Well, the big difference is, I don't think anybody cares about people having a choice. I think we give politicians too much credit. I think that I think the big difference is that the banks weren't prepared and they didn't have the reserves necessary and they needed to be backstopped. And so that's what the government did to ensure that there was plenty of liquidity. This time, as a result of Dodd-Frank and other restrictions that came into effect after that, they have been required to have appropriate loss reserves to be able to deal with adversity like we're seeing right now. And that's what's happening now. So this time around, the banks don't need stopgapping, and the showdown is not around housing. It's around the general economy, as businesses were forced to shut down, and as a result, they forced people out of work. And so that was just where the immediate need was to sustain individuals as opposed to try to save an industry. And I think that's kind of what's happening in the marketplace now. In terms of what's going to happen with housing, well, at the end of the day, at least in California, this may not be true everywhere else in the country, but we still have an inventory shortage, and we are seeing prices continue to rise, and we're seeing robust buyer activity that far outweighs what the inventory availability is, and so prices are continuing to go up. Now, if buyers get forced to the sideline because they can't buy anymore because of unemployment or forbearance, or their incomes drop, lending standards get tightened, and buyers end up not wanting or not able to buy, and you see a surge of sellers actually bringing inventory in the market, then you could see a dip in prices, but it's not going to resemble a crash, because to get the crash, the combination of events that have to happen is that you've got to have this much inventory. You got to have a massive amount of inventory and this many buyers. And right now there's this many buyers and this much inventory. Right. And that's why prices are continuing to go up. But it is certainly possible that can reverse. And I would tell you there's a lot more downside potential than there is, upside opportunity. But right now it looks like it's going to continue to trend, flat to up, slightly up, and not much downside unless the situation changes. That's
so
just my opinion. I could be wrong.
No, and I completely agree with you. In fact, my advice to my own mother was take the money out of the house. Take it while it's here.
Well, that's safe to do. I mean, at the interest rates, that you're getting right now, it's almost like having free money. So,
yeah.
If I were
they're forgiving up to a year of payments. To me, it seems, especially somebody, what I can't stomach is people in their 70s or 80s who are, pulling out credit cards or getting loans to keep themselves afloat. Cash out. Yeah. Just cash out.
You could go get a 50% loan, 60% loon, put $500
and a life insurance policy. Yep. Which is exactly what I told her. Yep.
Put $500,000 in the bank, and who cares what happens to housing?
Right.
Goes up, it doesn't go down. You're going to live here till you die probably, and we'll deal with it. And what and your mom said, but I don't want there to be a mortgage on it. There's going to be cash in the bank. Yep. There's going to be cash in the bank, and there's going to be equity. We'll figure it out. Don't worry, Mom.
But we're talking a generational attitude, right? Much like even the people that I've talked about previously who are younger, it's still fundamentally hard for them to wrap their brains around, I'm going to leave debt to my children. No, you're not. You're not. I mean, the worst case scenario is some bank or some institution takes the money. which leads us to a question from Armando. Strangely, here's a great gratuitous plug, David. For anybody who has any questions on any of these topics in California or throughout the United States, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, you just call me 805-379-3300, 805-379-3300. And I'm also David at helpyousellfullservice.com. Then the U is the letter U.
Armando asks a very good question, which is hard money does not have to abide by these rules. And you are correct. Federal guidelines, which only means a half dozen banks at this moment, and the FHA program. But
60% of loans.
60% of loans. There you go. So the other 40%, much like my landlord, if my landlord wanted to be a jerk and I didn't make the payments, he can process. He just technically can't go all the way to the courthouse and get me out with an unlawful detainer. The only thing that's stopped in California is the unlawful detainer process, not the foreclosure process. And I don't know how that is for the rest of the country. I can only tell you California-wise. So to answer your question, Armando, no, hard money lenders, people who are independent money, can still go get. What we're talking about is unlawful detainer. We're not talking about can you process a foreclosure. I think that's what everybody gets wrong. When the time comes, it's a pay, rent, or quit. Correct, David?
When it comes,
if it comes.
And just imagine the backlog of eviction proceedings that's going to take place.
The last number I heard as of July 1st, if they really did it, was 1.8 million people.
Yeah,
so
there's going to be such a bottleneck. It's going to take many times what it normally takes to process them all. It's going to be it's rough. I mean, I really feel for, I don't worry about the Black Rocks of the world, Blackstone, whatever they're called. I don't worry about that. I worry about the guys I do business with that own one or two. How they live in one, they rent one. They live in one, they rent two. Those are the guys that I worry about. Fortunately, the good news is most people are paying rent. So, this is really only affecting, 6-7%, of the renters, but the ones who are getting jammed up are getting jammed up. And I don't know what the number is, but I know that a very high number of people who are not paying rent or who are not making their mortgage payments because they're allowed to, don't need to. Their income hasn't been, affected at all. They're just taking advantage of the situation. And, I'm not sure how that's going to resolve itself, but it's certainly not ethically the right thing to do. There's nothing strategic about jamming somebody up that doesn't
certainly. And here's the curveball for everybody, especially those of you who are directly on the call, and feel free to put in your questions. The jammed up part is you're in an election year, so you, much like a bank, we're friendly. Hey, come borrow our money. We love you. We'll forgive your money. We'll do whatever it takes to make you happy. And now you're looking at a Democratic and a Republican side that are trying to get elected into a position of power. So, I mean, everybody looks at Mitch McConnell like he's a lunatic. And if you really look at what his plan is, it's not as crazy as you think it is. I mean, I get why everybody thinks that about him, because he's Republican and therefore he's bad. And then if you side with him, then you're a racist, white, whatever. We've become a divisive country of not understanding that there are two sides to the coin. The two sides of the coin are the Republicans are saying you can't keep robbing Peter to pay Paul. This will have to stop. The Democratic side is let's just give everybody more money and wait this storm out. Those are very extremes.
The Republicans are doing some of that, too, because nobody wants to be the party of no. Nobody wants
death.
To say no.
At this point now, you've got death. Now you got death on the table.
Nobody wants to do it. It's not a battle worth fighting, a couple of months before, the election. So, no one's going to, to do that. The big challenge is the Republicans don't even agree on the stimulus package that they have, which is going to make for interesting debate. And if they don't get it done in the next 2 weeks, they're on recess for a month. And then that is really going to, they're going to get something done, but
I don't think it's what people want it to be.
But the Republicans have to agree first, and then you've got to figure out how to agree with the Democrats, or the Democrats agree with the Republicans. However, that's going to to work out. But it'll be interesting. If I were I'd focus on getting back to work, and not sitting in my hands waiting for the government to pay me more than I would make if I went back to work. Just go back to work and take care of your family, take care of your business, and let the chips fall. If you can work, then work. If you can't work, then go look for a place where you can work and take what assistance you can take. But be a citizen. Don't take advantage of the system.
That's the interesting part,
advice
right?
Nobody asked for.
I mean, the politically correct answer is I can't agree with anything Trump, because therefore it makes me an extreme right-wing person. But the campaign they ran 2 weeks ago of do something different. Google's hiring online. Everybody's hiring online. They're looking for bodies to sit in front of a computer. Do something. And I get it. If I were getting a check in my mailbox, which was more than what I was making at McDonald's or Walmart, then why would I? And I completely hear the other side of the spectrum, especially, I mean, you and I are two separate sides of the coin. You're a mortgage holder. Well, technically not a mortgage holder, but technically a mortgage holder. A mortgagee. And I am a renter. And truthfully, if there were checks showing up in my mailbox that covered my nut every single month, I'm telling you, I'm watching Netflix and eating pizza. I mean, there's nothing to make me want to physically go do that. So I hear both sides of the coin. And for those in real estate that are listening to this, go out and find, there are bodies looking for places to live or buy. I think what we're kind of getting away from is the biggest commodity that came out of 2010, in my humble opinion, was real estate became the commodity over gold or silver or anything else. Real estate became the biggest commodity in the United States. That's why Blackstone did it. That's why Blackstone, one or the other.
I don't know.
They were smart enough to see the future, right? Because they have smarter people than David and I to go, the biggest commodity is being a holder of personal property. And now here we are a decade later, because I don't want to break it to you because I've been doing this since '88. Every decade, this has happened. It's happened in some way, shape, or form where we have a recession, we have a real estate lift, we have a dive. Like it, you can go on the web and you can Google this. This is not nobody should go, oh, I'm so surprised. This is how it happened. Well, yeah, it was COVID that did it this time. The last time it was based on shady lending practices. And the previous times it was based on giving interest rates that were way remarkably too high. So all these lifts and dives that have happened in the market and our recessions, the one thing let's talk about this. We're guaranteed a recession, David. I don't see the way around a recession.
Well, I mean, people argue that we are in a recession, based on technical measures. But the question is how long is it going to last? I think that's really the question. And how is it ultimately going to impact the economy? It's not impacting housing yet, other than there's a shortage of available homes to buy.
Well, and ultimately, that's what the question becomes, right? So we install Dodd-Frank, which puts us in a position where we're safer as renters and homeowners and people who, even the person who owns my place, you're in a safer position. Like he can literally go to the state and go, I've got 5 people not paying. What's my support? And there's some kind of support for him. But it's not the same for everywhere. I mean, let's look at what happened from the last meltdown and what happened with jobs. So California was the hub for all things banking, period, or all things, pretty much everything. Then they went to Austin. Austin became too popular. Call centers used to be in Indiana for IndyMac. They looked for the cheapest populace to make those. So there is no surprise in me that some place like Arizona is taking a massive hit, and even places like Texas, because you put businesses like B of A moved their call centers out there. Wells moved out to Austin. Most of the countrywide fell off to Austin. They're going to take the big hits, right? Those are non-essential jobs that can be outsourced to foreign nations now. I don't want to get into a whole debate of whether or not personal information should be shared over international lines based on Norton ramping up all their advertising about losing your information. But my point is, you're talking tens of thousands upon millions of people that are ultimately, I guess this is my question. Is there any way around zeroing this out? Like, there has to be a zero effect where somebody just goes, yeah, which was Ron Paul's original idea, which is probably why he probably never would have made it as president, which was, let's just declare everybody at a 700 FICO and start over.
I don't think you're going to see anything like that. I think the closest that we're going to get to zeroing out is all this PPP money that you don't have to pay back.
Right, right. Everybody's going to say, forgive it. It's no different than forgiving any. It's ridiculous. Like the insurance companies, we've become so top heavy, even in our own industry in real estate. We've become top heavy. We try to perpetuate this concept that 3% is what you're paying for my side of the transaction, and it's important. The other side will want 3% of the transaction. 6% is a lot of money, David. I mean, that's larger than the tax implications of making the cash back on the sale of a home. I mean, it's a crazy number that we have lobbied for repeatedly as, and by the way, for those of you who don't know the history, 6% is cut from when I started. 7s, 8s, if you did commercial, you were looking at 10. I mean, there were crazy numbers back in the 80s. That's a big number. And what we're learning is it's an economy based on supply and demand, right? We've got a couple of million real estate agents. We have a couple of million investors. We have some of the largest companies in the world that are willing to buy your house, including Zillow. Zillow will buy your house. You don't even need to try. Just go put your property on Zillow and say you want to sell it. Zillow will make you an offer at basically, remarkably, because I've seen it firsthand, close to fair market value. They'll shave it a bit, but it's still very close to fair market value with almost no cost involved in the transaction. How does a day-to-day real estate person compete? And the reason I'm framing this up as a T-ball question is it comes down to the service. What are you providing? What is your gift to the individual?
I think this is a whole nother episode to get into. I actually began writing an article today on why 6% commission won't last, and why that, and how realtors charge is going to change dramatically in the next couple of years. And I can tell you it's a very deep, complex conversation I think we should save for another time. But I can say this is what realtors are doing and what consumers want are not the same thing. And as a result of that, there's going to be a massive disconnect between the value that is being offered and the perceived value of that as it relates to how the buyer sees it or the seller sees it, and how the agent and brokerage see it. There's a massive disconnect that's taking place. At the end of the day, technology has forever changed the way real estate is transacted. It is the buyer and seller are doing a lot more of the work than they used to do, before the internet, before the technology, making it much less timely and expensive for an agent to actually do their job. But the commissions, especially on the buy side of the transaction, has not gone down, even though the amount of time and effort it takes to represent a buyer has gone down. as a result of the buyer more actively participating in the search of their home. And that is going to change. And you're seeing seller side compression, or it used to be, what you're saying, it used to be 6% and sometimes 5%, and then it became 5% and sometimes 6%. Then now you're seeing it's 5% and sometimes 4%. And more you're seeing the average commission is quickly approaching sub 5%, at least in California, where the prices are a little higher. It's not yet. It's not even 5%. It's still over 5%. But for the most part, you're seeing listing sides taking smaller commissions. If somebody's charging a 4.5% commission, it's 2% to the listing agent, 2.5% to the buyer agents. They're still trying to hold up to that 2.5%. The lawsuits against the MLSs and NAR that's taking place in the Midwest is going to end up in it changing through litigation, and you're going to see a lot of changes. I'd love to have I don't want to get into it now. Time doesn't permit, but I would love to have the conversation about how the industry is changing from that perspective, and how that will force change in the way that consumers and agents collaborate for the purpose of buying or selling real estate going forward, and what it already looks like in other parts of the world, so you can see what tomorrow is going to look like in the United States.
I've told this to many people, and I'll say it because David's right here in front of me. Look at the number one in their market. The number one in your market was doing 1% literally 3 to 5 years before you guys even came up with the idea. And now you guys would be happy to make 1%. David and I have done events in Vegas where we couldn't get local Vegas people to show up because Steve Hawks was speaking. Steve Hawks was doing 1%, 10 years ago? How far ahead of the curve was he on that concept? I mean, he wasn't competing with regular real estate agents. I think all of you listening to this call that are regular real estate agents that are still going to get your friends and family to do your transaction for 3 to 6%. I mean, look at the state number ones. I know this in San Diego. The number one person here was doing 1% when I met him in 2010. Like, everybody jumped ahead of the curve and cut their side to get the other side.
Now, I thought I heard recently that the number one guy in San Diego is now offering $1.
Kyle Wessel.
$1 co-op.
Kyle, I don't think Kyle's at $1. I think Kyle's near the top 5, but I've known Kyle. I taught Kyle short sales, but Kyle was doing 1% in 2010. So if he cut it to $1, good for him. Smart move. I think you should
$1 on the listing side, offering $1 co-op.
That would be crazy. I have not seen that.
I haven't. So maybe Victoria's down the field though, but I haven't.
But if it were me, I would say do your side for free. If I was a real estate agent right now, active, I would do my side for free and then actively move the property to try to get the other side. I mean, that's the most reasonable thing out there.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's continue this conversation.
Contact information, David. This is a good call.
All right. David, 805-379-3300. David at lowsetfee.com. That might be easier to find. David at lowsetfee.com. Love to chat with you about what we're doing and how we're doing it.